Psalm 119. Happy are the blameless who keep God's decree, who do no wrong. Who are these people? Have you ever met one? I don't think I have. I surely haven't seen him in my mirror. There's a lot in today's scriptures about the commandments and doing the right thing. And people turn to religion for guidance in life, and they should. But of course, our motives and understandings can be mixed, muddled, or just plain wrong. Some of us worry about that. Some of us just want to get it right, even though we mostly don't. We miss the mark, which is the definition of sin, to miss the mark. Or others of us work and pray and try so hard that we could wind up believing that diligence and scrupulosity is the point of life. So if we miss the mark so often, what can it mean to say we're trying to follow God? What does it mean to obey the commandments? Are they just obligations or duties? And if there's something else, what are they? Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe that there are such things as obligations or duties, but they don't simply float around in the air until they stick to us. If we have obligations or duties, it's because we've chosen them. At some point or another, we made a choice to say yes, or a choice to say no, and that incurred some responsibility. That might make our future choices more or less clear, but it certainly doesn't make anything easier. Matthew's list of broken commandments, murder, adultery, lying, slander, he expands these to include the feeling states behind them: anger, lust, cunning. How in the world are we supposed to live up to these standards? Well, there may be something else at work in these over-the-top commands. It's called hyperbole. I don't think Jesus meant for us to go around gouging our eyes out. But hyperbole is there from a literary point of view. And we know it was a common rhetorical device in rabbinic teaching in Jesus' day. But more importantly than that, there is a theological point here. And that theological point in all of this hyperbole is simply, none of us can live up to these standards. They are a life's work. That's why this passage tells us the desire to justify ourselves by oaths or declarations is morally unfounded. Jesus says, let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Which is another way of saying, it's better to live and state the truth of your own life and your own conscience, flaws and all. Because if purity is the moral goal of our behavior, we are certainly going to fail. Better to be honest with our faults and make ourselves available to God's grace than try to justify ourselves. Anybody on a spiritual journey is working on something, hoping and praying toward a better version of ourselves. Self-righteousness and attempts at purity are just going to get in the way of grace. Well, I remember as a school chaplain many years ago, a certain classroom discussion. We were in the unit discussing the sacraments, and this 5th grade class was learning the classical definition of a sacrament, an outward sign of an inward grace. So we went through them, And we went through baptism, and water is that sign. And we went through communion, and bread and wine are that sign. We went through anointing the sick, and oil is that sign. When we got to marriage, things got interesting. Some said the sign was the wedding dress. Some said it was the party. Some said it was the ring. And unfortunately, I had to answer no to each one of these things, and they became more and more frustrated with me. So finally, I had to give them the answer. The outward sign is the two people who are marrying each other. They are the outward, material, physical sign of the sacrament. The dress, the party, even the rings, all unnecessary. The 5th grade girls were horrified. "That's fine, Father Peter," they said, "but he had better have a good ring for me." Rings. We have claddagh rings, friendship rings, ordination rings, school rings, wedding rings. We invest objects like these with a lot of meaning and power. But these objects, like our duties and responsibilities, derive their power from choices that were once made. These choices help define a path for us. And these choices are themselves based on something even prior. They're based on a relationship with persons, or between persons and their values, or between persons and their conscience. And so rings, like God's commandments, do not just impose duties. They primarily express love. They derive from love. They support love. And yes, responsibilities follow. But our duties must be more than that if our choices are supposed to be life-giving. Another way of saying this is that a lost ring is not a lost relationship, but a broken commitment might indeed break a relationship. In certain days, in certain situations, a ring might remind us of a decision once made. But of course, if the ring is the only thing doing that, we are on very shaky ground. Because it's still grace that helps us do the right thing. It's still grace that forms the core of love. Love of God, love of others, love of self. And so the commandments are more than duties. The commandments are tokens of love, just like a wedding ring. It's another story. As a university chaplain, I had many conversations, you might imagine, about moral decision making. And I remember a particular tabling event at the student union. And this one student was going around visiting every religious organization's table and asking some very pointed questions. And so at our table, the first question he asked was, "Why be an Episcopalian?" So I answered, and he was asking seriously, so I gave him serious answers. Because from the beginning, Anglican Christians have worked very hard to welcome as many people of good conscience to the same communion table, whether they were traditional or progressive. And I believe that's what Jesus would have wanted. Next, he said, "Are Episcopalians Christian?" "Yes," I answered. To which he then asked, "What is your definition of a Christian?" I answered, "Someone who believes that Jesus is God in the flesh." Then he said right away, "So the demons are Christians?" "No," I said. "The demons don't believe Jesus is divine. They know he is." "But can you believe in Jesus and not do anything about it? He said. I said, sure, but that would be like being in love with someone and not doing anything about it. Oh. And then he went on to interrogate me on all the hot-button ethical questions of the day. Divorce, abortion, homosexuality. In each case, he wanted really clear black and white answers. And I'm sorry, but in each case I frustrated him. Because I maintained that these ethical decisions are complicated. That not all cases are the same. That they are primarily deep matters of conscience. And in each case, our responsibility is to inform our conscience and to exercise our conscience. Well, finally, in frustration, he said, so you're saying it's all complicated, there's no real answer, and these things don't matter anyway? To which I said, not at all. Nothing is more important than a matter of conscience, because it determines the kind of person we become and the kind of relationships that we're going to have. And I still believe this. Nothing is more important than a matter of conscience, even in 2020. So what does it mean to follow God? What does it mean to obey the commandments? Well, what does the text say? In our first reading, Deuteronomy says, obey the commandments of God by loving the Lord, by walking in his ways. The commandments are not based in obligation. They're based in covenant. They're based in love. They're based in relationship, and they're based in decision. And when we fail at that, Deuteronomy doesn't describe it as sin. It describes it as turning your heart away, going astray. So the commandments ask us to make a choice for love, for life, for relationship. They are not purity contests. They are tokens of love. They are the way we express love of God and others and ourselves. Of course we fail. And that's why we need to let our yes be yes and our no be no. That's why self-justification is a dead end. We need to let there be some space for grace to work in our choices, in our consciences, in our relationships. You know we will not always have the answers, and we will not always succeed even when we do have them. But grace and love are at the heart of the spiritual journey. There may be important tokens of relationship, but such tokens rest on love and on grace. A choice to love beyond the fickleness of our feelings can be the most important decision that we make. Nothing can help us make that choice better than the grace of God.